our first panel discussion. So let's kickstart the first panel discussion. In this discussion, we will be covering the topic multilateralism, the way forward in tackling global crises. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, with that, I'd like to invite all of you to please give a big round of applause to welcome our moderator, Mr. Tai Zihao. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tai, please. So Mr. Tai is actually an advocate, also solicitor, and also a well-known political commentator. Over to you, Mr. Tai.
I would like to invite the panelists for our first discussion this morning. His Excellency Datuk Iskandar Sarudin. And then let's invite Mr. Isham Jalil. And Yang Berbahagia Datuk R. Ramanathan. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you and welcome to the Early Morning Gentlemen Club, World Chinese Economic Forum. Allow me to introduce to you His Excellency Datuk Iskandar Sarudin. He's a former ambassador of Malaysia to Beijing and currently president of One Belt, One Road Association Malaysia. He has also served as the honorary advisor of Malaysia-China Chamber of Commerce and also committee member in the Association of Former Malaysian Ambassadors. Not to forget that Datuk also served as an independent non-executive director of a few public listed companies in Malaysia and also the board of audit committee member of Perbadanan Perwira Harta Malaysia. As a graduate of University Malaya with Bachelor of Arts in Art and Science, Dato' also represented Malaysia in the signing of a key framework agreement for the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank held in Beijing at 2015. Ladies and gentlemen, Yang Berbahagia, His Excellency Dato' Iskandar Sarudin. And next, we have a politician on board, Mr. Isham Jalil, who is the Information Chief of Selangor Barisan Nasional, with 20 years of experience in management, administration, and policy making in public and private sector. He also previously served as a director in the Prime Minister Office in Economic Affairs. Oh, wonderful CV, sir. Master degree holder in Political Economics and Law from Harvard University. Master in Business Administration in Finance from Water School of Business of University of Pennsylvania, as well as first class honors Bachelor of Engineering degree from the University of Bristol. Last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Isham Jalil. Round of applause, please. Well, last but not least, Yang Berbahagia Datuk R. Ramanathan, who is now the group advisor and co-founder of Ikhlas Suci Sedia Berhad. He served as the president of KL Selangor Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He is also the president of the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, Yang Berbahagia Datuk R. Ramanathan. Without further ado, I would like to ask the first question, a very specific question pertaining to today's topic, to Mr. Isham Jalil. Sir, are you ready? We had a failed attempt in forming the TPPA. If choices has to be made, will it be more beneficial for Malaysia to join a multilateral alliances headed by China or the West? Mr. Isham.
Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum. Saya minta izin pakai rostrum. Okay?
Boleh. Dipersila.
Ladies and gentlemen, My name is Isham Jalil. I just got back from the flood area last night, and it was bad. And I'm going again this afternoon to help the flood victims. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that too. And I'm going to take about 8 minutes of your time reading through what I've written last night after seeing those things. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this event to talk about multilateral initiatives. You might wonder, what am I doing here? So I'm a politician. So when Zihao mentioned my name as BN Information Chief, I understand nobody clapped, because what is a politician doing at this event, right? So, thank you. Well, I used to work for 20 years with the government and government-linked company. And half of my career I spent on infrastructure development, and the other half was on political economic development, which both had given me the opportunity to be involved in multilateral initiative, particularly for large-scale infrastructure development. I was also working at the economic planning unit way back in 2008. If I could, I prefer to speak Mandarin to you, but unfortunately, I'm not able to. I'm sorry for that. So please allow me to speak in English in plain and layman terms on this highly complex subject, so that the message goes to a wider audience instead of confined to experts and economists. Ladies and gentlemen, throughout history, whenever a country built a cross-continent or international transportation system, the country always became superpower. So what they did was they go and they say, Veni, Vidi, Vici. They come and see, and they conquer. And the Romans build roads, and they conquer. The English build ships, and they conquer too. But modern cross-continent or international infrastructure development is not about conquest, fortunately. It is about economic cooperation, and China is already a superpower, so we should not worry about that. And 3 years ago, I spoke on behalf of the Prime Minister Najib in front of 3,000 business delegates from China, touching also on the One Belt, One Road initiative, now known as the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. Now, a lot has happened since then, and you must have already known. We changed government, and then we changed that government. Ironically, it was done here in this hall. That's why it is known as Lanka Sheraton, remember? So this is Sheraton PJ. And also, we changed Prime Minister 3 times in the last 3 years. This political fluctuation is temporary, I hope, and it will stabilize soon. And between all that, we faced the COVID-19 pandemic, and now the big flood, which so far has taken more than 40 lives and caused an estimated of more than 2 billion worth of private and public damage, including 50,000 cars inundated in 8 states. This is possibly the worst flood disaster Malaysia has ever faced in 50 years, certainly by the number of deaths, and we are not even close to out of the woods on COVID yet. This crisis poses a lot of challenges to us economically, socially, and politically. We have got to navigate and get through these challenges fast. The question is how? Well, to me, there are domestic and international things that we can do first. First, domestically, we have got to get our house in order, put the right people at the right place. Because institutions don't mess up, but people do. And the government needs to coordinate public and private efforts, because in a crisis, the market often panics. So there needs to be some sort of central command to take action swiftly to stabilize the situation and restore confidence. We need a strong government during crisis. Second, we need international cooperation too. This is where multilateral initiatives come into play during crisis and in the aftermath of the rebuilding phase. Crisis can be global or local, but all crisis management is local. Certainly, all rebuilding efforts is domestic. To rebuild the economy, We need to increase and restore trade to what it used to be prior to COVID-19, and we need to rebuild much of the infrastructure damaged by the flood, and to build more infrastructure to mitigate the next flood disaster. We also need other new infrastructure such as roads, telecommunication, healthcare-related, and pandemic prevention-related infrastructure. Now, traditionally, we focus on bilateral cooperation to increase trade involving two countries. We buy heavy industry equipment from you, or China, and in exchange, you buy our palm oil. And you did. You bought a lot of palm oil from us. 60% of our palm oil export is to India and China. And China takes 20% of the total, or about 2.5 million metric ton a year. Please buy more and buy other of our products too. Now, we used to do bilateral infrastructure development too, where firms from other countries build and finance our infrastructure projects. We used to do this a lot with Japan following the Look East policy in the 80s and 90s. Now we are not only looking at bilateral trade and bilateral infrastructure development, but to multilateral infrastructure developments where international contractor from one country bids for projects financed by another country or by an international financial institution. This multilateral initiative has been the growing trend globally for the last few decades. In the last 2 decades, we see firms from China winning a lot of international contracts, even by those tenders floated by the World Bank and Asian Development Bank. Now, Chinese firms are now more competitive than their Japanese or the South Korean counterparts. Over the last decades, more World Bank contracts have gone to Chinese firms than to firms from any other country in the world. Now, Chinese firms had secured 20% of World Bank contracts by value. In the last 20 years, the total value of World Bank contracts won by Chinese firms are 25 times more than the value of contracts to the American firms or the US firms. Now, half of these are for projects outside of China. This is impressive, considering only less than 20% of World Bank contracts value awarded to other countries' firms are for projects outside of the firm's home country. Now, Chinese firms are becoming more and more competitive internationally, and they are certainly capable, no doubt, perhaps due to their economies of scale, or extra or overcapacity at home, or albeit even due to state-backed financial and natural resources. This can be a good thing too for the rest of the world, where we can get our infrastructure built at lower price than before, lowering our debt and taxes burden to our people. However, should we be concerned about the competitive Chinese firms making inroads into our domestic market? Well, they are already here. Their products are everywhere. But what about the construction industry? Isn't that always local? The answer is yes and no. Labor and construction materials are local, but technology may not be. Now, 20 years ago, we started talking about globalization. And we now know that we can't stop globalization. It is already here, and we can't afford to live in isolation. So there should be a way to synergize both local and international partnership in the construction industry too. After all, Chinese firms did partner up with us and build the second Penang Bridge with substantial involvement by local firms. And we can add preferential margin to local firms too for leveling the playing field, as even the World Bank or the Asian Development Bank contracts allow for local preferential margin in the bidding. So we should not lose out. But the problem is not to whom we want to give the contracts to now, whether to give to local or to give to international firms from China or from any other country. The problem is that many of the potential infrastructure projects in Malaysia are shelved or do not go past the planning stage because of financing constraints and issues. Fortunately, China doesn't only build. They also offer financing. So here is where we can help each other too. Because if these potential projects take off, then the local contractor will benefit too. Now, China used to be a recipient of multilateral financing institution, but now it is more and more becoming a major donor with shareholding in 18 main multilateral financial institutions and multilateral development bank, such as Asian Development Bank, Asian Development Fund, International Finance Corporation, etc., with significant voting power, only second to the United States. But in Malaysia, the government doesn't really borrow from multilateral development banks or multilateral financial institutions anymore to build our infrastructure like we used to. Our government debt stands at 62% of GDP at over 800 billion, and 97% of that is borrowed domestically. And much of our infrastructure now built by private finance initiative or public-private partnership, where government financing is limited to seed capital, and the rest of the project financing is done through private bonds and sukuk from the capital market, often backed by government guarantees. Though our government external debt is currently at only about 28 billion, or 3 to 4% of total government debt, our private external debt, the debts by local banks and corporations or firms owed to foreign lenders, stands at over 1 trillion ringgit. This was mainly driven by privately funded infrastructure developments as mentioned above. Most, if not all, of this amount is the borrowings from the capital market and not from multilateral development banks or multilateral financial institutions, perhaps because it is easier for local private firms to work with foreign private financing without the need for government inputs required by multilateral banks. Therefore, the Malaysian government doesn't like to hold external debt. We know this. And on the other hand, private firms in Malaysia don't like to borrow from multilateral banks. So where does multilateral initiative for infrastructure development fit in this picture and in BRI? And can it fit in? My answer is it can. You see, we don't like foreign debt, but we sure like foreign investment. We used to finance profitable projects through debt because we did not want to share the profit with you. Hence, we pay you only interest and we take all the profit. But now, we don't want to increase our debt. So we probably should share the profit and share the wealth with you, provided we share the risk with you too. This can be done through your investment, through the financial institutions that you control. You can invest here with our local firms on our local ventures in any sectors of your liking, including infrastructure. And why invest in us? Because we always pay up. And with your help, we can build and rebuild this country together. This is win-win. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jalil, for your elaborative explanation about the current situation. Mr. Jalil, would you mind to explain in one sentence,
Right.
if given a choice, Malaysia should join a multilateral agreement to form a ties with an institution that's headed by United States of America or China? Just one sentence.
Okay, our foreign policy has always been equidistant, meaning we are not pro-China, nor are we pro-United States, we are pro-Malaysia. So, yeah, we're pro-Malaysia. That's one sentence.
Thank you very much. Pro-Malaysia, not pro-other country, but Malaysia.
But can I elaborate in 1 minute?
20 seconds.
Now, yeah, but the thing about it is, if you, based on my text just now that I read, if you see, Chinese firm has been very, very competitive, so they can build the infrastructure really with really competitive price, lowering the burden of our fiscal burden. And at the same time, they offer financing as well. So we probably should not look at ideological difference between the US, the West, or East. So I think we should look into what benefit us the most. So if they can provide the same infrastructure with cheaper price and with good financing, we take it. That's it. Thanks.
We take the best for the country, regardless which country it is from. Thank you very much, Mr. Jalil. And my next, thank you very much. And my next question is towards Yang Berbahagia Datuk Ramanathan. It's a very simple question. Will protectionism affect the implementations of multilateral agreements in one country? And if it's so, how?
Simple thing, like for example, if there's no protectionism, I'm sure we should be able to buy Porsche Benz at a very much cheaper price. Am I right? Same, see, for example, for Proton to survive in Malaysia, we are actually having so much protectionism. So we could sell the car in our country, while when go overseas, they do also play the same game. So that's why when these cars, when come into Malaysia, like luxury cars, we're having a problem. When we go to UK, US, it's much more cheaper. So here again, protectionism is, I think, are we Malaysians ready for protectionism? I mean, opening up is another big question. Like just now, the earlier speaker was sharing with us, talking about BRI also. When you're talking about BRI, the whole place is going to be bilateral agreement. So we're just talking earlier. Is it going to be between China and Malaysia? Or then they talk China and Pakistan. That means they are signing bilateral agreement with every country. And when it comes to Malaysia, can our contractors bid and win the contract? They have the economies of scale. They have the funds. Do we have? I was talking to some of my friends from other Chinese Chamber of Commerce. They were sharing the same thought. When they went to that country, when they're trying to do some business in China, it's difficult for them. Even though they speak the same language, it's difficult for them because they're much more shrewd compared to us. Sorry to say that. The same applied to me also. Even though I speak Tamil or Indian language, when I try to do business in India, I find it difficult because they are much more shrewd. And we Malaysians, are we ready for opening up everything? On the other hand is, if we are not going to go for this opening up, we might have the same problem future. So the only option today now of what we are Malaysians facing is we have to skill ourselves. We have to develop ourselves digitally. We must have our own skill. We can't be just hiding behind the protectionism. So I think, can I? The economic fallout from the COVID-19 has caused major disruptions in the global supply chains, movement of people grinding to a halt, and unemployment rates. Today in Malaysia at this moment, let us look at it. Foreign workers. Many of our business over here, I'm sure everyone, all companies over here are having a problem with foreign workers. We did not bring in any foreign workers for the past 4 years. When the new government, Pakistan, took over, until now, we had COVID issues, so many issues. We couldn't bring in foreign workers. And so much so, we couldn't survive. Many of the companies are still struggling. And at this moment, when the other countries are asking for multilateralism, we have to open up. If we are not going to open up, they might not even give the workers to us. And we need workers. Especially for the 3D jobs, we need workers. And we're also talking about tourism. Our tourism is really affected. So I think, here again, multilateralism is very, very important. And the COVID is just finishing. Forget about the new one. I can't get it pronounced properly. The new virus. We are talking about, even in spite of that, I'm sure the pandemic is coming to an end. And very soon, we are going to jump back or going to catch up with the lost time, for which we should be prepared. So we should think of working with the other governments and see how we could collaborate with them. We work with them to improve our standing, so that we could actually export or, and, improve our business. We can't just depend on Malaysia. And another example is like, for example, digital. I do have a company which we are doing digital apps, something known as earned wage access. Later, when you have time, just go through it. We tried out in Malaysia 1.5 years ago. This is actually very popular in UK, US, very, very successful. When we tried in Malaysia, we could not succeed much. But we tried out in Indonesia, it's doing extremely well because they have the population. And Malaysians are not ready to accept digital, ready to accept change. So I think here again, the mental attitude. We are so comfortable with whatever we are not ready to go for change. And I'm also involved in IFM, which means for facilities management. We had robots. Like if you go to Changi Airport in Singapore, they have robots cleaning the entire airport, robots. So same thing, I tried to bring it down from KLIA, but I could not succeed over here because Malaysians, even corporates or government is not ready to accept change. So here again, our government have to look into giving more subsidy so that we can incorporate all this high-tech or technology developments. So we do have certain obstacles in Malaysia. We have to think of how we could rectify that, and our governments, our leaders, our politicians, they should think about it so that we are ready to fight with the other countries. We cannot just be happy with what we have. And then the other thing is, like, for example, agreements. We're talking about RCEP. RCEP, I'm sure we are not ratified yet. We do have so many issues behind it. So I think, considering all these issues, we need to really think of a way where we all develop ourselves, be prepared to face the reality, what's happening in the world. The whole world is becoming smaller and smaller. Everywhere, we go anywhere, the same thing, whatever product we have there, we have it over here also. And the cost of production must be cheaper. Can we fight with China? The cost of production is much more cheaper. So we have to think of how are we going to fight with them? How are we going to be competitive? And we are talking about in 2030 or 2040, we're talking about the whole world is going to be like, the superpower is going to be China, followed by US, followed by, India and Indonesia. So we have that advantage. We in Malaysia, we are close to, we have India, China, and Indonesia. If we could actually collaborate, work with them, we should be able to get to a next level. And this vaccination, and our government is also very, we should be really thankful to our leaders. They've actually made sure the vaccination is given to everyone, irrespective of whether they are foreigners or not. This shows that we really support the foreigners. So the same way, anything we do, we should consider them into our plan, and we should try to improve our structure so that we are competitive in the world. So I'll add on to you all later. One more point is, no one is safe. Okay, no nation can be alone. It has to survive another nation. I'm sure everybody have to work together. That's why multilateralism. So I think we collaborate with other countries, we work with them, and see how we could partner with them and develop Malaysia, and as well as develop our own business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yang Berbeza Datuk. And I do have a follow-up question. Given that protectionism, Datuk, is a must to protect an imperative to build an economy, and multilateralism agreement is inevitable to pursue further on economic growth. So what are the key factors to determine the ratio between protectionism and multilateralism when they have to coexist at the same time?
See, when it comes to protectionism, of course, we all have our own personal interest. We can't one fine day close up, open up everything. It has to be progressive. I think our leaders and the government, our leaders are actually looking into it. It has to be stage by stage. We have to take care of our own interests to make sure our citizens are safe to a certain extent, while we collaborate with the other people. And so there should be like on a very slow progress to change, to open up. I think what we're doing now is more or less okay. I think we do not one fine day open up everything.
Thank you. Can I add something? I believe that Dato is still preparing, so you have 30 seconds, right, Mr. Jalil.
It's really difficult for us to increase protectionist policy. We tried that 20 years ago, and now it's even more critical because you see 82% of our large firms in Malaysia input comes from outsourced from outside, you see, from foreign countries, and half of it is from China. So if we impose protectionist policy, they're going to retaliate. This is what's happened between China and America, so it's going to increase our costs. So what we have to do is, instead of going for protectionist policy, so we got to know how to manage and navigate without protectionist policy, but we got to ask what's in it for us if in this highly globalized and competitive environment.
Is it safe to conclude that protectionism should be phasing out? Just
it should, because it doesn't really work. We tried it for 30 years and it didn't work.
Yep.
Ideally, the whole world should be one nation.
Wonderful. Very ideal. Thank you very much, Yang Berbahagia Datuk, and also Mr. Hisham for your follow-up answers. And I would like to invite Yang Berbahagia Datuk make a presentation, but the presentation is based on a very short question, Dato'. Is Belt and Road Initiative bilateral or multilateral? And how does Belt and Road Initiative benefit Malaysia in terms of economy? Yang Bagai, Dato'.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. For the answer of the short question, yes, BRI is a multilateral platform. As all of us know, BRI is initiated by the Chinese. And personally, a big country like Chinese need a platform to reach the whole community. And as Chinese become a very significant player in the international issues, BRI is a very important foreign policy tools of the Chinese government to reach the international community. Chinese needs this platform, so the answer is slightly long. So it is a multilateral platform. And it is a very good and important and beneficial platform for the members countries of the BRI, including Malaysia. Although there is some controversies here and there, but we can see from 2013 until now and in the future that BRI will still continue to become a very important vehicle. Thank you.
And we would like to invite Dato' Iskandar to make a presentation.
Hello. Hello. I hope you can hear me. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. In short, BRI, as I just said just now, is a multilateral platform, an important foreign policy tools of Chinese government. And in recent years, China has become a significant international player in multilateral diplomacy. China participates actively in various multilateral diplomacy platforms, both at regional and international level. In 2013, China initiated its own multilateral platform known as One Belt, One Road, and later changed to BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, participated by more than 120 countries, including Malaysia, and it is basically a huge scale of infrastructure investment program. I will try to combine a very specific subject in my presentation, which is renewable energy, and connected to the BRI initiative. For renewable energy, it is one of the latest initiatives by China under BRI and has received mixed reaction by the international community, both among the BRI and non-BRI countries. For BRI countries, it is a golden opportunity to develop its own energy capability through alternative energy sources. I am confident that BRI countries can reach a certain degree of consensus to establish the energy collaboration. However, this will come with many, many challenges. According to many reports to date, more than 100 countries have identified renewable powers as one of their prime ways of meeting their commitment under Paris Climate Agreement. More and more meetings and conferences are taking place, and more subjects and issues relating to renewable energies are being discussed. In short, the whole strategies of energy sectors are aimed at two fundamental goals: the need to provide adequate supplies of affordable energy to sustain growth, and the imperative to reduce emissions to tackle the global climate change. BRI has more than 120 countries, with 76 of world total population, and 1/3 of the world GDP, or about US dollar 23 trillion. It is still fresh in our memory that 2008 was a year of financial crisis, slowing of global economic growth, trade protectionism, and anti-globalization. China played a major role in response to the 2008 financial crisis. ASEAN countries recovered with the help of Chinese economic and financial measures. For this, ASEAN has always indebted to the Chinese for stabilizing the region and prevented the whole economic and financial structure from a total crisis. This is the background for the Chinese to offer to the international community for a stable and prosperous community. As such, BRI is the new driving force of multilateral diplomacy to steer the global economic growth. Based on BRI 5's connectivity policies, BRI countries have all the mandate and support to establish the collaboration in renewable energy. But as I said earlier, such a collaboration will also come with many challenges. Since the announcement of BRI in 2013, China International Energy and Measure and Resources Cooperation has become a top priority for BRI development. BRI Energy Cooperation was first launched in October 2018 with the convening of the BRI Energy Ministers Meeting and International Energy Transformation Forum held in Suzhou, China. In this regard, China's commitment on energy cooperation are as follows: strengthening energy cooperation with other countries in the framework of BRI, create favorable conditions for the advancement of common development, jointly promote sustainable development of global energy, and achieve global energy security. As one of the global key players in renewable energy, China's high percentage of wind, solar power installed capacity is an indication that China is ready to play a major role in laying a solid foundation for renewable energy cooperation with BRI countries. For example, China's share of wind, solar, and hydropower made up of 57% of USD 11 billion of China total investment in energy infrastructure in 2020. This shows up of 38%. I would like now to say something briefly on challenges of this renewable energy. One is the financing difficulties. Credit risks in many of BRI countries are the biggest barriers. Secondly, lack of electricity interconnection to bring renewable power to market. Thirdly, varying so many various regulations and standards in the BRI countries. Then come to tariff and low electricity pricing. Then investment restriction and other trade barriers. And inadequate national policy support. And lastly, lacks of cooperation between key countries of renewable energy in important areas such as technological innovation. I would like to make some suggestions on this. One is China must also take into consideration of the sensitivity of BRI countries, as these countries are sovereign nations, and among others, guided by international development and localized cooperation, focus on overseas power plant investment, international standard operation, coordinate foreign investment strategies of renewable energies enterprises, regional environment constraint, and risk prevention mechanism and support system. We have, at this moment, more than 8 or 10 of renewable energy cooperation among the BRI countries. Now I would like to make some recommendation on this subject. All BRI countries must prepare a comprehensive planning by building and connect international cooperation platforms through bilateral and multilateral mechanism. Promote cross-border research and consultation on renewable energy and developing policies. Promote the formation of BRI renewable energy cooperation standards, norms and guidelines, and form a multi-level international cooperation system for renewable energy. Lastly, I would also like to touch on the emerging of some 1 or 2 similar initiatives made by other countries on something like BRI. One is the EU. The EU has come out with a term, with a platform called Global Gateway. This was announced just a few days ago. So China faces a new challenge in its multilateralism diplomacy when EU recently announced its own Belt and Road initiative called Global Gateway. It is a €200 billion initiative, and it's remains to be seen if this European alternative will become a threat to the Chinese BRI. Secondly, is the US has also announced during the last June G7 summit what they call is Build Back Better World initiative, a new and a dynamic for a better transatlantic cooperation, a policy framework that less hostile and anti-China initiative initiated by President Joe Biden. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yang Bagwaya Dato' Iskandar. I do have a follow-up question, a very short question. Given that China may have a seat, Dato'. Given that China may unilaterally include or exclude certain countries from the BRI, and at the same time, what Malaysia have with China may not have something to do with what Pakistan have with China, is BRI actually a form of bilateralism in the name of multilateralism, Dato'?
Thank you. You can see that. Hello. Now, what is important here is to create a region of stability and progress. China cannot survive if this region is not prosper and progress. That is why China needs the support of the region to make themselves prosper and progress.
And hence the word mutual prosperity.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dato', for your answer and your comprehensive explanation about the Belt and Road initiatives. Thank you very much. And the second session about this on this forum is that I'm going to ask 2 questions, same question, and to be thrown on 3 of our panelists, and you choose one to answer. Okay. The first question being, we have seen countries forming multilateral ties and alliances for their own security and economic advantage and purposes. Latest being the AUKUS. Is this the way a country should value to form a multilateral relationship? Or what are the better reasons to form a multilateral ties if this is not what we should have value? That's now question number 1. Question number 2. Recently, there was a lot of attack from the Western media and the government on China being not democratic. For instances, issues in Tibet, in Xinjiang, and Hong Kong. The question is, does democracy or freedom plays a role for a country to determine whether they want to form a multilateral ties headed by a country that was attacked based on democracy and freedom? So there are 2 questions. Choose one to answer. We start with Yang Berbagai Dato' Ramanathan.
Okay, here again, multilateralism. Talking about Joe Biden, President Joe Biden. Prior to that, President Trump was saying nationalism, America first. He was talking America first. That means everything is America, because he was saying that American airports are not good, it's not good, and so you want to build it up, and he was focusing only on America. When President Joe Biden came in, he is a person who walks the talk. He has promised to make it a multilateralism, because this is a big country, and he has promised to open up. He has promised to make sure the domestic policies and foreign policies are targeted towards getting everybody to participate, all other countries to participate. So multilateralism is already there. Here again, we're talking about BRI, we're talking about to a bilateral agreement or whatever, but multilateral agreements is important, is there, but whether it's good for certain country or not, here again, how much the company can and the country can actually take over the whole thing. Like big boys, they can play a big role, but like smaller countries or like us, we should be looking at whether we could actually participate in the multilateral trade agreements. We have to look at it carefully before we go into it.
Thank you very much, Datuk, for answering two questions in one answer. Brilliantly done. Allow me to repeat the question again. The first question is about what should we value to form a multilateral relationship with another country? And the second question being, does democracy or freedom play a role when forming a multilateral relationship with another country? Isham. Sir.
I suppose it's like this. I mean, the project of RBI is multilateral because it involves a lot of countries. But as far as each country is concerned, the interest is always bilateral. What's in it for me against what is in it for you. So nobody does agreement. I was APU last time that, okay, I do agreement with you, but I was okay about some third party. Nobody does that. Now, what is happening right now in BRI is that the whole project costs about 900 billion US dollar, 3 times what Dato mentioned just now from Europe. They do this initiative. It's worth about 300 billion project. Now this time, this thing is 3 times 900 billion US dollar. But where does this 900 billion come from? It is raised by debt, you see. A significant portion of this 900 billion comes from debt. And who bears this debt? So who bears this debt is the country where the infrastructure is going to be built. So if the infrastructure is going to be built here, then we bear the debt. As I mentioned just now, we don't want to increase our debt. And as I told you too, and I know some of you in this room are businessmen from Malaysia, right? Local businessmen. And some of you are probably businessmen from China. A lot of people watching at home or through the internet, half of them from Malaysia, half from China. So the conflict is that in this whole thing, so who got what at a piece of the cake? Now, I tell you, we have established that we can't do protectionist policy anymore. We know that. So, and I tell you too, there is no problem of Chinese firm, a firm from China to come here and construct and outbid you all, firms in Malaysia. Now, what happened in Africa, I tell you, for projects is financed by African Development Bank, right? AFDA. Now, local countries there in Africa, they put preferential margin for local contractors down to 15 to 20%. And still the Chinese firms outbids them. So imagine if they come here and outbids you all. So we got to ask that. I mean, we got to bear the debt. So what's in it for you? So this is the thing. So we cannot impose protectionist policy. So how do we get around that? So how we get around that is that, so if they want to come here, so the government, our government and their government also have to help us to go to China, to sell more of our stuff in China. Maybe not just palm oil, we have timber products, or maybe do some construction work in China or something. Because if you look at, I mentioned just now, 20% of the contract by World Bank, the Chinese firms got it, right? So they are the recipient of the most World Bank contracts. Now, 8 out of 10 of their firms are state-backed. Now, we are not competitive to go against this state-backed firm. But what we need is, since we cannot impose protectionist policy, now the government need to help us to go into China to sell our product and to do projects there. As for the second question, does politics affect how we do business? Yes, it does, particularly in Malaysia and Asia. I was overseas for 8 years. I spent 5 years in the UK and 3 years in the US, so there are differences in the way we do business. Now, in Asia, we always do business based on trust first, and then we sign the contract. If I don't trust you, I don't sign the contracts, no matter what it says in the contract, doesn't matter. But in the US, if you don't trust a person, you can put up a lot in the contract, then it is settled, right? So how this affect this BRI and OBOR is that we do the business with Chinese first, so we need to establish trust with them, and they need to establish trust with us. This is where politics comes in the picture. If the political ideology conflict, it is very difficult for us or them to trust us, then we cannot do business together. So it is really, really important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ishan, for the clear answer. And same question to Yang Baba Dato'. First question being, what factors to be considered for a country to form a multilateral ties with another country? And second question being, does democracy or freedom plays a role for a country to form ties with other?
I will try to answer the second question first.
Wow. Thank you.
Now, you simply cannot impose your own standard to other countries. Democracy has its own standards. And if democracy in the West projects certain standard, does not mean that standard apply to others. Here, for example, if human right is the main criteria to measure the democracy in a country, then many countries will be in havoc. LGBT, gays, all these will become part of the human rights. But if you practice this, or surely Malaysia does not practice this, so if you try to impose this standard to certain countries, I'm sure that it is something like what is happening now between US and China. And very soon that we will see whether China react this, in what manner when China hosts the Winter Olympic in February next year. There are some countries already telling the world that they are not participating at official level, but athletes are most welcome to participate in this. The first question, I think the first consideration is national interest. What is the best for national interest before we form alliance or establish bilateral or multilateral platform? For Malaysia, we have certain national interests in certain subjects. So we have carefully managed this to save our national interests, and we entertain whatever policy measures or ideologies by the international community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dato', for your direct answer to both of the questions, so clear and concise. Thank you very much. And I would like to open to the floor for Q&A session. If you have any questions to ask any of our panelists, please raise your hand so that our brothers and sisters may just pass you the mic. Any questions? Any question from the floor? Yes, I have a question over there. Can someone pass the mic to him? You may ask a question and direct to all of the panelists or specific panelists. Yes, over there.
Good morning. I don't know who should I pose this question, probably to Mr. Hisham Jalil, because you are the advisors of the previous prime ministers. I think everybody in this room, we are all for globalization. We are all for foreign direct investments. There's no doubt about that. But end of the day, from what I gather, we have actually awarded more than 50 billion projects to the China's companies. My question is, how do we ensure that our local businessmen are protected when we are giving so much project to our foreign investors? There are even complaints by our own local Chinese chambers of commerce that not only that the top management were brought in from China, but even the supply of the materials are also not taken from the local businessmen. So how do we ensure this when you advise or part of the government that the local businessmen are protected? That's number one. Number two, in terms of transfer of technology, from what I gather, whichever company that goes into China, one of the conditions is there must be transfer of technology from the foreign companies to the Chinese government or to the Chinese people. But in this country, we are not sure. For the past many years, we have problems. From what I gather from the information that we read from the newspaper, there is a lack of transfer of technology. So once this overseas company goes out, the local businessman cannot continue with the business because there is no such transfer technologies being transferred to our local businessmen. So how do we ensure that these two things are actually giving benefit to the company, to our local businessmen? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your great answers. Actually, there's an overlapping issues in the first question about protectionism, BRI, and multilateralism. So I would like to invite Yang Berbahagia Datuk to answer on how we should protect local businesses when implementation of multilateralism's agreement like China comes in Malaysia. Yang Berbahagia Datuk.
Okay, fine. As we just discussed about it, we do have national interest. We have to first take care of our national interest. We should first survive. So, looking from that point of view, we can't go on saving ourselves for long. We have to open up. So, looking at the time frame, we have to be careful when are we going to open up. So, what are things where we could actually safeguard? For example, this IT and China coming in a big way into Malaysia. How are we going to take care of them? And I could remember a couple of years ago, there was a big contract came from China, and some of my friends were bidding for it, and they couldn't succeed. And later the government stepped in and saying that, okay, a certain portion of it, 20% or 30%, must be reserved for Malaysian contractors. So then only these people, we were able to survive. Because we could not compete with them. So from that point of view, government plays a very important role in safeguarding our interests. We should survive first.
Thank you very much, Dato'. And the second question I'd like to ask Yang Berbahagia Datuk Iskandar pertaining to transfer of technology. How should we secure that to our local businesses that technology will be transferred to us when we engage in an implementation of an international agreement? Dato'.
On the first question first, I think the local businessmen must try to graduate from the present situation. You cannot prolong this situation. You cannot just simply wait for the government to feed you. So this attitude must be changed. So that the challenge that you face now is something you can face, and what is more important is you cannot treat this as threat, but look at as opportunity. And the second one is a very long topic that has been discussed by many countries, and I think here the government must play its role first. The transfer technology is in the hands of the government, and the government must revise its policy framework, the legal framework, so that it protects our local interests.
Thank you very much, Dato'. And Mr. Isham, did you agree with the answer by both of our panelists?
Well, I think it's like this. I mean, number one, we know this thing is coming, the RBI, and we can't stop it. And if we don't want to be part of it, they're just going to bypass us. So what do we do now? We can't, like I said, we can't do protectionism. And so one of the solutions is we ought to negotiate better. I mean, who can negotiate with a China firm, a Chinese firm? As I told you, 8 out of 10 of the Chinese firms that have been winning contracts around the world are state-backed. So we are not competitive against state-backed. So because, well, I started my career 20 years ago building power plants. Now, it used to be in construction industry that the construction materials, for those of you who are in construction industry, the construction materials are always local, right? So labor are local, construction materials are local, but 15 to 20 years ago, it was not so, because we got steel coming in from China, right? So last time we used BS quality, British Standard quality. Now some of the construction now use CQ, right? Chinese quality. Now the steel coming from China. Now, any one of you who works in construction industry know the big part or big chunk of construction is what? Steel and cement. So because cement is too heavy for them to carry from China, come here, okay, now cement, we use our own cement, but steel comes from there. So how are we going to be competitive? Now, if you are SME or even big firm in Malaysia, now, if the government, this is where I disagree, if we have to swim on our own to negotiate with the big firms from overseas, because they're just gonna outbid us. They're gonna kill us. You know, so this is where we need some sort of smart negotiation. Our government needs to be smart to negotiate with the big firms backed by state from other countries. Otherwise, we're just not gonna survive. That's my opinion.
Thank you very much for the very comprehensive answer for all three of our panelists. Round of applause for them. I thought they did a very good job on this. Okay, I will take last question from the floor. Anyone? All right, if there's no other questions, I would like to invite all of our panelists to wrap up. Not so soon, that they'll wrap up. So, multilateralism is the way forward in tackling global crisis. 1 minute. We start from Mr. Isham.
Okay, as I said before, we have to deal with this, and we got to deal with China. And I like this BRI and OBOR initiative, because last time when we saw expansion like this, we become sinister and we thought it's for conquest or whatever it is. But this thing, I think it is for purely economic reason. They want to expand because of overcapacity in China or something. So we gotta manage this. Now China is now number 2 largest economy, second largest economy in the world. But in 9 years' time, in 2030, they're gonna become number 1. So we're gonna have to deal with 2 superpower in economic, which is China and the United States. I think in 5 to 10 years, we're gonna be closer and closer to China. So we're gonna have to discuss about this protectionist policy or whatever to protect our own interests, so that we don't get a raw deal out of this. So we have a win-win situation between us and the big countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Like what Dato' Iskandar said, we must graduate from the school of protectionism. Yang Berhormat Dato', multilateralism, the way forward in tackling global crisis.
Thank you. I think for any country, bilateral and multilateral are the most important tools in practicing the diplomacy. We need these 2 platforms to protect our national interests. But in order to do this, we have to be balanced, because we are not a big superpower, but we need the cooperation with other countries, especially the superpower. So the bilateral and multilaterals are very good instrument for us to protect our national interests.
Thank you very much, Yang Berhormat Dato'. And last but not least, Yang Berhormat Dato' Ramanathan.
Multilateralism. Can you hear me? Yeah. To sum up, see, as earlier just mentioned, we have to develop our skill. We have to develop how are we going to compete with the other countries. That's very important. We can't be running away from them for too long. As Mr. Hisham mentioned, China as well as US are superpowers. In addition, we have 2 other superpowers coming up. So we have to really be prepared, develop ourselves. Even though we consider ourselves a small country, we still have lots of opportunities. We have a language, we can, infrastructure, and etc. We try to develop ourselves so that we can also compete with them. Technology change, okay, fine. We do, even though we might not have so much like the big superpowers, we still can develop ourselves, spend some, government should spend much effort on developing our technology, train our people. At the end of the day, we have to develop ourselves. That's the only way I think we could actually be in competition with the other superpowers. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of our panelists. Round of applause. And we all conclude that protectionism is obsolete. With national interests in heart, multilateralism is the way for the future. Thank you very much, Yang Berbahagia Dato' Iskandar, our president of our One Belt, One Road Malaysia, Persatuan Muafakat One Belt, One Road Malaysia, Mr. Yang Berusaha, Encik Hisham Jalil, Information Chief of Barisan Nasional Selangor, and Yang Berbahagia Dato' Ramanathan, Chairman of Kuala Lumpur and Selangor Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you very much all. Mistress of Ceremony, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much to our moderator, Mr. Toy, as well as all the panelists for bringing us such an informative and also mind-blowing session. Can I have all the gentlemen on stage to please come forward and let's have a group photo taken, all right, to commemorate this very special occasion. And of course, we will appreciate if you could put on your mask. Thank you. That's right, let's have a beautiful picture together. And of course, may I invite Dato' Shamsun Baharin to please come on stage and present a token of appreciation to the panelists as well as the moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up to Dato' Shamsun, please. Firstly, to our panelists, I would like to invite attention to please present the token of appreciation to Dato' Ramanathan. And then to Mr. Hisham Jalil. And next, the panelists, Dato' Iskandar Sarudin. Not to forget our moderator as well, Mr. Tai. And of course, let's have a group photo taken together. A group photo, please. Dedicated to all our gentlemen on the stage for bringing us so comprehensive session. Thank you so much. And I would like to invite all our gentlemen to please return to your seat. Thank you.